Inspiration for Teachers podcast, bringing you dynamic and inspirational educator interviews. Our fascinating guests share their professional challenges and creative resolutions for success. Discover their workable strategies, ideas, and resources to reach your educational goals. And now your host, Kelly Long.
Welcome to another show of Inspiration for Teachers podcast. I'm super thrilled to have our guest on the show with us today, and that is Vic Goddard. Now, if you're listening in the UK, you will definitely know who Vic is, because I'm sure that you would have seen Educating Essex, which was a Channel 4 production where the film crews went into Vic's school and they filmed everything that was going on. So it was really insightful. But I'm just going to hand over to Vic now so that he can give you a bit more background information as to who he is and what he's done in education.
Hi Kelly, how are you?
I'm very good. Thanks for joining me on the show, Vic.
You're very welcome. So my name is Vic Goddard. I'm the Principal of Passmores Academy in Harlow. I've been head here for a few years now, 7 or 8 I think. And back in 2011 we took the decision to allow Channel 4 to put cameras up around the school. No film crews, just remote controlled cameras, and to film a year in our life. They filmed about 15,000 hours in total. And that got edited down to about 5 hours and 40 odd minutes of TV. So as you can imagine, we took put our life in our hands a little bit. And thankfully, 3 years later, it came out okay. We are still alive and working hard. I've been very fortunate to still be at Passmores. I started here as assistant head and then became deputy head and head. But my background is PE and maths originally. Always did a bit of maths because that way I knew that when my knees gave way and I got too old and too fat, I had something else to fall back on. And so maths has proved a lifeline over the course of my career. And now I specialise in teaching Year 11 boys maths who don't want to pass their GCSE, really.
So Vic, I just need to take you back, because allowing people to come into your school and film what is going on, how much control did you actually have in the kind of final editing cuts? You know, what control did you have on that? Because that was quite a big risk to take.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately we had no control. No commercial company is going to give you editorial rights over a series they paid lots of money to produce. I'd like to point out that the school didn't get any money for it at all, apart from money to repair the holes in the wall where they took the cameras down. It was. I think brave is something I've been called regularly, which translates to crazy, I think, in some people's heads. I think in reality it was a reasonably naive decision. I mean, back at the time, who's going to be interested in what is a very normal secondary school in England, where, you know, we don't do much differently to most other schools up and down the country. So who on earth's going to watch that apart from my mum and my brothers and sister, really? And to our great surprise, sort of 3 million people did on a weekly basis. So, brave. I think it was braver for the people who said yes to the series that have come since then, because they knew what they were letting themselves in for. We sort of didn't. So it was one of those moments where you go, yeah, why not? We do a decent job. We work hard, just like teachers up and down the country. And we'd seen lots of rubbish television about schooling and schools and lots of rubbish headlines. Actually, why don't we show them what we really deal with and how we deal with it truthfully and honestly?
Well, before we find out a few more insightful pieces of information from you about all of that, what we have been doing on the show recently, I've been asking all of my guests to share some insights into what the heart of teaching and learning is all about. In your opinion, what do you think is core to teaching and learning, and what do you think teachers should be implementing on a regular basis?
I think that clarity's the key thing that I think's missing often in education. I think we've suffered from a lack of clarity in the profession from above us, clarity of direction and purpose and rationale. And I think actually if we can make sure that in all of our lessons we've got that, you know, that young people are clear about expectations, clear about standards, clear that you like them, clear that it's okay that you have a relationship. You're not going to go to the park with them, but actually you like their company. I think clarity is absolutely at the root of sort of a worthwhile and focused experience. If we can all see the purpose in what we're doing, then actually we've got a choice to make that becomes easier.
A lot of the former guests on my show have had this a similar kind of understanding of teaching and learning and have shared similar points that you've just done. But a lot of them have come back to teachers having a stronger blueprint of who they are as educators and what they want education to be. Would you agree with that?
I think that is changing. I think Ofsted's view of the inspectorate's view of not grading individual lessons, not having a prescriptive 3-part lesson approach, etc. I think that's helping staff. I think the responsibility to release the final shackles is often coming from head teachers and senior leaders in a school. You know, that it's okay to try something new and for it to fail. At Passmores, we've done something called a Passmores Risk It Week, where staff, students and parents know that teachers are going to try something new this time and they're going to try and do something a bit different. And it may not work. And we need their feedback if it worked or it didn't work. And I think empowering ourselves to make mistakes and try new things, you know, and if it doesn't work, try something else, is actually not only really important for us to develop as teachers, but also for young people to see as role models, you know, that they're not going to find everything easy. They're not going to do something right the first time. I think too often we go to that CPD session, we go to that training session, somebody says, try this, you go away, you try it once, it doesn't work and you never try it again. But actually, how many things in life work first time? You know, it is about, you know, a palette of pedagogy, a range of activities, a range of resources, a range of approaches. And I think that's why it's so important that we continue as teachers to grow and to develop. And the changes that are coming around technologically are massive these days. Actually, my generation of teachers, OHPs existed when I was started teaching. You know, overhead projectors. You used to write on acetate and put them on a light bulb. You know, life's a very different thing these days. And I think we have to accept the fact that we need to evolve too.
I think that's fabulous. It's a bit like the Olympic cycling team when they were kind of looking at how to change their performance, and they started looking at marginal gains and just shifting a little bit all the time.
We use marginal gains here. So we have removed Ofsted's what they describe as an outstanding lesson, and we've come up with our own version. So we have a big poster that's in every room in the school, says, the Passmores experience is, and you will experience these different things. And certainly marginal gains is a thing that we started on our journey with. We sat down as a member of staff at a training session, and I asked staff to write down the small things they've seen great teachers do. And I think we came up with 150 different things. Now, I didn't agree with all of them. You know, one of them was occasionally play Bob Dylan, I think somebody wrote down. I was like, really? But, you know, just simple things like smile, meet and greet at the door, change your position, get down to their level. Actually, if you're a teacher and you go into a room and you see somebody, you go, yeah, they've got it. What they actually do is lots and lots of little things really well. And certainly marginal gains is something that we've used as a sort of starting point and a driving force to make changing your pedagogy less scary. You know, I know that I teach maths in quite a dull way. You know, I haven't progressed in my maths teaching because it hasn't been a priority, if I'm honest. And I know that I go in and I demonstrate on the board, I show an example, you do a worked example, they have a couple of goes on their own, and then they have an exercise to do. That's what they do. That's what I do. And actually, I'm actually probably quite scared to do anything else because it will take me longer to prepare. It will take me longer to get organised. And actually, have I got the time? And I need to be empowered as well and force myself to go, well, if I taught it a different way, it would save me time in the long way and they'd understand it better. I think I need to be allowed to fail too. And I think probably a little bit of me as a head teacher goes, well, I can't afford to fail. I'm the head. I've got to get it right, you know, and I probably need to change myself around that too.
So pushing yourself out of your comfort zone is very much where we all tend to grow, but it is quite a scary thing. And introducing marginal gains sounds really exciting, but if somebody else was thinking about doing that in their school, Vic, what would you say is the kind of plan that you took in terms of identifying you said 150 points that people came up with, but then how did you drive it forward from there? Because if you're asking your teaching staff to make, it doesn't sound like a lot of changes, but you just demonstrated yourself that you don't really want to change your teaching practice. How do you go about implementing that?
I think that has to be ethos driven. You know, we try to create classroom environments where young people are able to fail. You know, that's a big thing. If you ask teachers about what they strive for in their own classroom, it would be that young people can push themselves to failure. They feel free to to ask for help if they need it. Actually, as a profession, we need to try and think about that. The problem we've got is we have cutthroat accountability. You know, the Premier League football manager approach to being a head teacher these days is quite scary. And I think probably that permeates down, you know, performance related pay, all those sorts of things say, well, actually, we need to be risk averse. Nonsense. The only way you make positive change is actually to be pro risk. I'm going to try something new. You're going to try something new. And that's difficulty when actually you could lose your job at the end of it, you know, and I think there's a lot of questions to be answered further up, well above me, about the climate of potentially fear that can sometimes exist because you're being weighed and measured. We all know that weighing a pig doesn't make it heavier, you know, and actually there comes a time where we've got to stop worrying about, you know, how well we're doing and actually say, well, how far can I push myself to be even better? I'm not certain we've yet got that, but from our point of view, you know, an ethos around this school of open door, of asking for help, of having a directory. We have a something called the Buzz directory, which is basically a list of everybody's strengths because we've all got them. And if I'm observing a lesson and I see somebody maybe has got an issue with questioning, let's say, I go to the Buzz directory and say, well, Dawn's brilliant at questioning. I've seen it. Why don't you have a chat with her and see what support you can get? And then invite me back when you think you've made some positive changes. You know, actually it being a dialogue rather than it being just about weighing how well they're doing. And if we can create that vibrant dialogue that actually me as a head, it's okay if I come into your lesson. I'm not weighing and measuring you. You know, there are lots of ways we can do that. You know, Iris Connect, which is a great piece of kit, which is a camera you can put in the back of your room. For those that are old enough to remember the pick and mix shops in Woolworths and stuff, used to be a camera underneath a black dome that spied on you. I can sit in my office and watch a lesson going on live through this piece of kit. That means I don't have my impact on their behaviour, my impact on that teacher, but I can actually sit and watch them and give them feedback directly through the software. So I think it's about removal of fear. It's about empowering them to say, I can try something new. If it doesn't work after a little while, I can try something else. And I think that has to come from the top of the school.
That's a really nurturing environment that I think a lot of teachers want, but I think you're right. I think the way in which the system is set up prevents us from, you know, putting ourselves forward to fail and to try something new because, you know, we're going to get hauled over hot coals if we do it wrong. So that's really interesting what you're doing in your school, Vic, and it's very exciting. And that shifts us on nicely to what you find exciting about teaching and education. And then also, we've probably touched on it slightly, but the flip side of that, what you'd most like to change and why.
I think what excites me at the moment is we've got a generation of teachers coming through who are very technologically savvy. I look at the technological world and how much more connected we are, and actually what that is going to allow us to do as teachers, allow us to do as educators, allow us to open doors to different experiences to young people. I'm a dinosaur. I'm very aware of that. You know, I'm in my 40s. Mobile phones didn't exist when I was at university even. Thank goodness. Got into all sorts of more mischief. You know, the new generation of teachers coming through, the new technologies that are emerging are really interesting tools that if we use them right are going to help hugely. But don't get me wrong, I'm not somebody who thinks just because I bought everybody an iPad, we're automatically going to get better. They're just tools, a bit like chalk used to be, a bit like an interactive whiteboard is. You know, they are tools to enable us who are still going to be the most important factor in the classroom. The teacher is always going to be the most important factor in the classroom, that relationship. But actually, we can use technology to smooth that journey, to make it quicker, to connect them with somebody in India or Australia. That's really exciting.
And I think we automatically assume that young people are digital natives, and they're not. I mean, I was even just in a lesson before this call, and I was showing my kids how to use Pinterest as a way of sourcing evidence for their coursework. And when I asked them, who's using Pinterest? One hand went up. I was like, why are you not all using it? It's amazing.
They know what they know. You know, let's be honest. What tools do they need to exist in their lives, their day-to-day lives? What tools do young people need? Well, most of it's through social media. Most of it's through messaging of some sort. It's about relationships. That's what most of the stuff they deal with. And actually to take it to the next level, you know, things like Khan Academy, all those sorts of things which are going to directly support their learning. Yeah, okay. Where are they going to stumble across that unless they're incredibly self-motivated? And I think schools giving them that information early in their lives. You know, I look at revision and year 11s. You know, it amazes me how few of them use the apps, the amazing apps that are out there. You know, they're still writing it out, which is fine. That's a method, but it doesn't need to be the only method. So I think you're right. I think there's still a lot of education. What they are, though, is comfortable with technology. I think there are certain, you know, teachers in this school and in lots of schools where actually they're just fearful of it. They won't turn it on because they're fearful of it. Young people haven't got that fear. They'll give it a go. They'll try something. They may not always necessarily be the most positive involvement. You know, I'm not quite certain what they learn from Instagram. But, you know, they're still not going to be fearful to try it.
And just before we move on to what you'd most like to change, I'm just going to tell everyone that there's a fantastic app out there called GoJame, and it's got all of your subjects on it, and it's got lots of revision tools, and it's totally awesome. It covers all the subjects, and it's got all the units that they do, and they can just go on there, and it's a great revision tool. So yeah, that's a little recommendation for me.
I've learned something. I'm straight on that the moment we finish on the call.
Excellent. So let's go to what you'd like to change and why.
It's interesting. I managed to have a conversation through being famous loudmouth head teacher, I guess. Have a conversation with quite a few key people, including Mr. Gove before his demise as Secretary of State, and Lord Adonis. And I asked them both the same thing: that do they think that any Secretary of State is going to give up half of their powers? Because I think that's what needs to be done. You know, MPs are elected amateurs in the education world, and actually, should they be the final decision maker on curriculum? Should they be the final decision maker on assessment? No, of course they shouldn't. You wouldn't let somebody unqualified make decisions about what the protocol should be. You'd have somebody with experience. So the biggest single thing for me would be for a very brave Secretary of State to say, well, I'm not the right person to make decisions on this, this and this. There's enough expertise and experience around the profession to do that for me and to advise me in the best way forward. There's been a lot of talk about a Royal College of Teaching being set up here. You know, and it's been both positive and negative. I can see that there are some people, old Andrew on Twitter, for instance, he's quite reticent about it because he's concerned that it will just become full of interested others, consultants, etc., rather than teachers, because we're busy, and how much time have we got to give up to be part of that? I think that's actually the biggest thing. Give the long-term decision-making powers and the long-term influence over the important things, curriculum, assessment. You know, that shouldn't be in the hands of somebody who could be in their job for 5 minutes or 5 years. You know, I've never sat and counted, but I'd hate to think how many Secretaries of State for Education I've actually worked for in the course of my career. But I reckon probably about 15 to 20. Now, they can't all have been right. They can't all have been expert, you know, and I think if we can take that away from a 5-year political cycle and put it in the hands of a long-term plan that isn't going to blow in the wind and change, that's got to help all of us, and more specifically help the young people that we serve.
I think so many people agree with you on that, Vic, because I was talking to Richard Gove in his episode, and he was saying something very similar, that he speaks to MPs and behind closed doors, they totally agree with what we're saying, but they can't say that in public because the press would tear them apart and wouldn't let them do it.
Well, the interesting thing, I think one of Mr. Gove's great skills was his ability to handle the media. You know, he's got a journalism background. And I think his ability he owned the word standards. You know, if anybody spoke against what Mr. Gove's drive was, it would be, well, you're an enemy of promise. You know, it's all about high standards. And of course, that's an easy rhetoric to say. You know, it's a bit like the latest announcement that's come out from the newly appointed Secretary of State saying about coasting schools. Can somebody write me a definition of what a coasting school is? Does that mean you're not constantly improving your results? Because there'll come a time when that isn't going to happen. You know, my current year 11s, for instance, are didn't start anywhere near as academically highly as the previous year. So should I expect our results to go up this year? Well, of course I couldn't, because they started lower. But actually, that's what people are saying. You know, the famous everybody could be above average comment that Mr. Gove is attributed to Mr. Gove really is what they strive for. I understand that education is always going to be a political thing because everybody has it in common. And so therefore, there aren't many things that we can talk about that we have a common interest and background in, and education is one of them. But actually, it being in control of somebody whose own job is on the line, who's never going to actually be completely honest about it because they can't be, because their party won't let them, I think we're setting ourselves up to fail.
I think we definitely need to move education out of that political arena as much as we possibly can. But I think we could have a conversation about that all day, Vic, and I'm sure everyone listening to it would be like, yes, we agree, let's change it.
Fortunately, without somebody putting that out of the manifesto and giving us a chance to vote on it, we're not going to be able to, are we?
Exactly. But let's move on now and let's have a little shift to putting the spotlight on you and look at a specific challenge that you have encountered in your career that you would like to share with our listeners, and talk about what that challenge was and highlight some of the solutions that you've encountered so that we can all learn from you.
Of course. Currently, we became an academy sponsor, not this September, the September before. And so we sponsor 2 local primary schools in our area. And what's really obvious, one of them was in special measures, and one of them is in requires improvement. And actually, working with those schools that have got that real scrutiny of Ofsted on them, led the head teachers to potentially make decisions that were about Ofsted and not about the young people they serve. And for me, my biggest challenge is to constantly remind myself that actually, if I serve my community and I serve the young people in it, Ofsted and everything else will take care of itself. I call it the law of diminishing courageousness. And I think, the closer we get to an Ofsted inspection, the more likely it is we're going to make risk-averse decisions and not be courageous in them and not say, actually, no, it doesn't count in our league tables. That's fine. But it does count in our locality. It does count in our community. It will get them a job. So I'm sorry, I'm going to continue to do the ICT qualification. Let's say that it doesn't count in the league tables, but it does count and get our kids jobs. That's a brave thing to be able to do. That's a brave thing to be able to justify. But actually, I absolutely owe that to the community that I serve. Parents, when they do their Year 6 tour around all of the schools, which they will all be doing in September and October, they listen to the head teacher waffle on to them, and then they make a choice, same choice that I made for my son. It's, do I trust the person who's standing in front of me to deliver my child? Do I trust that person to look after them, to keep them safe? And if the answer to those questions is yes, and they put my school down as first and their child comes here, actually that's the most important bit of weighing and measuring I can have. Ofsteds will come and go, but actually a parent choosing to allow me to be part of their lives, part of their children's lives, that's a privilege. And that's what has got us at the forefront of all the decisions I make. I serve a community. I don't serve a government. I don't serve a Secretary of State. I don't serve Ofsted. Yes, I need to keep my job because I've got bills to pay and a family to raise. But truly, am I going to be kicked out if I do what's right for this community and I do it well and they leave with good results? Well, I'm not going to be kicked out, and I'm going to be strong in that decision. That's tough sometimes. And I look at my special measures colleague who is school, and our relationship grew very quickly because he just needed a bit of empowering and say, actually, I'm going to do something different even though Ofsted won't like it because it's right for the school. And it came out of special measures at the first time of asking, which we were really chuffed about. But that, for me, is the key. I have to serve my community and not serve my paymasters. And if I can just keep reminding myself of that and surround myself with people who will challenge me if I don't, then that's something that will improve my school. My young people here will leave Passmores having had a happy and valuable experience. When they become parents, they will look back on school through that lens and will therefore become involved parents. So yeah, okay, it may take us 20 years to change this community and the parenting of it and the children come to it, but for Harlow's best interest, that's the right thing to do.
So there are lots of things that you've highlighted on there, Vic, that obviously for me, lots of ideas are now going through my head and also for our listeners. But if you're talking about supporting a primary school that's in special measures, that's quite challenging because you must be absolutely firefighting because you know that Ofsted inspection just around the corner. How do you know what fires to put out and know what to tackle? I mean, how do you do that?
I think what happened in this country a few years ago with the development of big chains of schools, run almost as businesses or actually as businesses. You look at the sponsorship of schools. It became a little bit franchisey, a little bit of, this is what we do. This is what we do. So we go into every school and we drop this in, and that's the approach that will happen. For me, sustainability is about evolution and not revolution. You don't go in and throw everything out and start again. You look at what's strong. You make sure you nurture that. And then you, as you say, you prioritize what else there is to do. And actually, safe and happy children is the first thing. Are they safe? If children are safe in the environment, now safe means behaviour management. Behaviour needs to be tackled. Young people need to be able to come to school and not be abused by other young people. So for me, that would always be my starting point, making sure they're safe. Beyond that, having a staff group has a common purpose, means you'll work in the same direction, and it'll always come back to levels of literacy. If I was gonna look at a school from scratch, no matter where it was, how well are they teaching these young people to be literate? How well are they going to embrace the English language? Because that unlocks so much else. And for me, that's always going to be the key. Literacy is core in everything. UNICEF would say that the biggest single thing that would take a child from poverty is teaching them to read for pleasure. Absolutely agree with that. The love of our language has got to be the most important thing. So I would always start with that, be that phonics, be that read writing, be that whatever it is. Let's start by making sure they can access the curriculum, and that's got to be down to literacy.
And you mentioned about sustainability and within the community in which the school sits. And sometimes the outside community presents a lot of challenges. So with a struggling school, how do they engage their parent community? How do they bring on board their support?
Yeah, that's it. When I started at Passmores, I had one of my most difficult nights with regard to parental involvement. We run a restaurant evening, so our catering, students studying catering, open the school up as a restaurant, and you can book and you go in and the children design the menu, serve, etc., etc. And I remember I'd only just become head, and I went to my first one of these, and there were 20 odd people there. It was only a small little room set, 20 odd people there. There wasn't one parent. It was 2 students, and the rest were teachers at the school. And I oh my God, this can't be how it is in the future. These young people can't feel that their parents are that disinterested in their education, and also we can't allow it to continue. So we have to look inward and say, so why don't they want to engage with us? Is it historic? Is it the fact that they had a poor time at school? Okay, so let's invite them to something other than a parents' evening where they're going to be moaned at. And actually, let's be flexible in when they're invited in. So we got rid of parents' evenings at Passmores. We don't have subject-based parents' evenings apart from at the end of the school at GCSE time. We have academic tutorials, and those academic tutorials come out after reports. And member of staff can make those during lesson time if that's the best time for a parent to be there, and we'll arrange cover, because actually it's more important that the parents are in there than it is for us to miss 45 minutes of a lesson that we can get somebody else to do for us. So it's about flexibility at schools. It's about, opening the doors up for something other than being moaned at. Our first contact with year 7 is in October. It's before half term, and we invite the parents in for a glass of wine, a glass of beer, or an orange juice. Their young person's job that evening is just to introduce their parents to their teachers. Nothing else. They don't talk about their learning. They just introduce them so they've got a face. Kids also write a letter saying what their dreams and aspirations are for their 5 years at Passmores, and parents get that at the same time. And so it's a nice environment. I deliberately every year stand up and talk to parents holding a bottle of bud in my hand, probably. Say that actually I'm a human being too. I drink beer. Look at that. Isn't it amazing? Because actually their perception is that I'm a head teacher 24/7. But actually I'm a dad, I'm a brother, I'm a husband, and all those sorts of things, just like they are. And to try and break down those barriers. And I think if we open our doors up to parents and get them involved, the impact on their kids is massive. 18% of their adolescence is spent in school. 82% is spent outside of school. So who is the biggest influence in their lives? Well, it shouldn't be us. It should be their parents.
Exactly. And my heart sank then when you said that the only people in that room were all teachers. I thought, those poor students.
Absolutely. It doesn't happen anymore, I'll be honest. And, our productions are sold out, well in advance and things like that. And because I challenge parents, I said to parents on the open evening, if you are not going to be actively involved in your children's lives at this school, if you're not going to come to productions, if you're not going to come if they're opening an envelope, then please don't choose Passmores, choose a different school, because I will be on the phone to you asking you why you're not here. I meant it, and I do it. And now that we have a change of philosophy, and parents are very, very much know that this is not a one-way journey. This is three ways: us, their child, and them.
Because it takes a village to raise a child, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And we contribute. We contribute to their growth. We contribute to their education. We are not all of their growth and not all of their education. And I know for a fact that I am the most important teacher in my child's life. And I mean that without being a teacher. You know, me as a parent, me as his dad, is the most important teacher in his life. I look at some of the things he does and cringe because I think, well, no, that's me. Yeah. He walked past his mother and smacked her on the bottom the other day. I know that I do that. So it was hard for me to tell him off. She did.
My 3-year-old often looks at me, and when she's not happy about something, she kind of furrows her brow and looks up from underneath her eyebrows, and I'm like, oh, I do that.
But isn't that a responsibility? Isn't that a huge responsibility for somebody? So it has to be a team effort, because that responsibility is too great for one person, I think.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that knowledge, Vic. That's been fantastic. And I know that our listeners will have taken away so many ideas from that. But we're going to shift on to our inspiration round. So you're not off the hook yet. You've got to give us more knowledge. But just before we go there, I just want to remind our listeners that they can find all of the information regarding resources and all the show notes on our Inspiration for Teachers website. Head on over there and you can find all of this information on our resources page. I'd like to find out from you what your proudest moment has been in education.
That's interesting, because obviously I've got some personal things that I'm proud of. So I set out as an NQT to become a head teacher. When I started in the profession, I always had a drive to become a head. I'm one of those sorts of people that if I'm going to do something, wants to be at the top of my profession, I guess. And so being invited to be head teacher at Passmores was a huge moment for me, because I always planned to be ahead at 40 and out the door at 55. Suddenly be ahead at 37 because there was nobody else left apart from me, I think. That was a great moment for me, and I was incredibly proud of that. And it was interesting when the TV show went out. I had a phone call from reception, and the receptionist phone said, "There's a John Rothwell on the phone." I was like, well, the only John Rothwell I know is my ex-pottery teacher, believe it or not, from when I was at school. I got a CSE grade 1 at pottery. There we go. And it was him on the phone, and he phoned up to say how proud he was the fact that a student that he taught in what was the failing school in the town. If you passed your 11 plus, you went to one school. If you failed it, you went to the school I went to. That I'd become a head teacher and I was making a difference and all those sorts of things. So from a personal point of view, that I was really proud of that. From a school point of view, one of the reasons we did Educating Essex, and one of the main reasons we ever spoke to anybody, was sadly about 2 or 3 months, in fact, before I received a call from the production team about coming in for a chat. One of our young men unfortunately died of a heart defect. And he'd started school not well. He'd struggled throughout primary school, with his strength and his link to his heart, etc. But as he got older, he got stronger, and actually he was in year 10. He was year 11 age, but he was in year 10. And actually by this stage, he looked good and he was in school and he was really an active part of us. And then, unfortunately, he passed away. And I was really proud of the fact that his parents asked me if the hearse could come to school on its way to the crematorium, because he'd been so happy at school and it was such an important part of his life. And so of course we said yes. And we had all of the school. It was this really horrible December day, and had the whole school, over 1,000 children, a couple of hundred staff, lining this road in the rain and the cold in the most respectful and perfect silence you can ever imagine. I'm getting all choked up.
I'm getting all teary.
Sorry. And for them to show that innate respect that they had, and for them to understand how important it was for Jamie and his family, it blows me away now thinking about it.
Gosh, it is me, and I'm tearing up here.
Anybody that's seen a TV show knows that I'm a wuss and I cry at the drop of a hat, so it's fine.
Well, I cry at adverts, so we have something in common there. That's totally wonderful, and aren't young people just fantastic that they can do that at the drop of a hat?
Amazing. As I said, it's a privilege to have the job I've got, and I do remind myself of that on a daily basis.
Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing such a personal story with us, Vic. Let's move on to the best advice now that you've ever received, and that might be from, moving from an NQT to becoming a head, or it might be something to do with teaching, or it might be something to do with leadership.
Yeah, I've received lots of advice, don't you, as a teacher through your profession and as a person. I think I'd like to share the worst advice I've been given, which was don't smile till Christmas. That was simply the worst advice that I was ever given. I was given that on numerous occasions throughout the start of my career. When you get a new class, when you start a new school, don't smile at them. And I just think that's just innately just ridiculous. Why should I not show them that I'm pleased to see them? Because then you never know, they might show me they're pleased to see me. So that's singly the worst piece of advice that I've ever heard. I've been given lots. I think there's a book by Rachel Jones which she asked for lots of people to contribute to, and there's one of my educational heroes called John Tomset, who's a head of a school in Huntingdon School in York. We're all asked to write 10 things about the profession that we should remember. And his was the first chapter and mine's the last. And I remember reading his and got to his last point 10, and thought, I don't need to read anymore. And it was, remember that the quickest, I'm praising, remember that the quickest way to improve the lives of a socially deprived young person is to get a good set of exam results. And I think sometimes I forget that. I'm very much about the whole young person. I'm very much about making sure that the child feels safe and happy and nurtured, but actually happy failures is still a failure. And for me, as much as, I want our young people to enjoy coming to school, they also need to feel challenged and step up to that challenge. And that's something that sort of resonates with me. And when I'm thinking, actually, this young person needs an arm around their shoulder, they do, but also they need to be a success and to achieve. And I can't sacrifice one for the other. Either way, either from a nurture point of view or from a academic achievement point of view, that balance is the key thing. And that's something that is very live in my mind all the time.
It's so funny that you said that, because we've had so many guests on the show that have also shared the same book recommendation, and Rachel Jones has been on the show as well. So it's really fabulous that everyone is sharing that advice. It's kind of like teaching 101.
I felt really guilty because Rachel tweeted me to contribute to the book. Now, I didn't know it was for a book. I thought it's for some pamphlet or something. And so I wrote mine. I'm going to let a secret out of the bag now. I wrote mine on New Year's Day morning, laying on my bed, slightly hungover. And I didn't know that it was going to be what it ended up being. And so if you read mine, they are really short. They are 1 or 2 sentences, because I thought that's all she was asking for. And then when you read the book, some people have done pages and pages and have really gone into detail. And mine are things like, mine are literally 1 or 2 sentences. So I do feel a little bit guilty in hindsight that I could have put a bit more time and effort into it. But actually, I stand by all of them. And actually, they're quite succinct and to the point. But it was probably due to slightly too many Jack Daniels and Coke the night before.
Is that why you're at the end of the book, Vic?
So last dregs. She's hoping nobody gets to it.
So let's move on to your sources of inspiration. And I think you've already hinted at it with John, but what would you say those would be?
There are lots of people. I'm very easy to be inspired. I think, I come from a sporting background, and I can think of numerous sporting people. Lance Armstrong used to be one, sadly, so did Oscar Pistorius. But people like Michael Jordan and people like that. From an educational point of view, it's actually other head teachers. I've been really lucky since the show was on, through Twitter and through, working for the Head Teachers Roundtable think tank to try and influence government choices. I've met some amazing people. John Tomset, I've mentioned, who I aspire to be the head teacher he is. Dave Whitaker, who runs a special school at a BESD Special Academy in Barnsley. He's the only other educator when I spoke to him that used the phrase unconditional positive regard in the same way as we do as an ethos driver for our school. He's amazing. His school's an amazing place to go and visit. Ross McMullen, who runs one of the old style academies, Tony Blair's academies from back in the 90s. David Young Community Academy in Leeds. She's invited me. I've been fortunate to go to her school and do a peer review for her passion for the job, having doing it a lot longer than I've been, has been amazing. Lots of people on Twitter, Ross McGill, Teachers Toolkit, Stephen Tierney, Leading Learner. Tom Sherrington, head guru teacher, the little bits of you hear from them just make you go, oh God, I want to be better. I want to be as good as them. And, that drives me, I guess, because I know that there are people out there doing things better than me all the time, and so I want to strive to be a bit closer to them.
And it's all challenging you on Twitter, isn't it? I mean, I can't believe how much you can learn just by going to Twitter, even if you're not engaging in the comments. Just reading what other people are talking about, it really opens your mind. It's like, wow, I need to get better. I
mean, just sitting and watching SLT chat on a Sunday night, you don't need to take part, you don't need to contribute to it, but just sitting and watching what other people's viewpoints are and things they're trying makes you go, oh, God, blimey, I hadn't thought of that. Or, I think Twitter is one of those things that I think can be much maligned. I think also, and there are reasons for that. There are some crazy things that people do and say. But actually, for me, the network has allowed me. I always laughed at people who had friends they'd never met. I've got friends I've never met. I have. Through Twitter, I definitely have people that I'm I share a viewpoint with that I know that if I met them in a pub, we'd have a really good laugh and over a cold drink, Twitter's been an amazing source for me of challenge as well as support.
So let's move on to a personal habit that you have that you think works for you time and again that you think others could learn from.
As a head, and even as assistant and deputy head, I was the, you pick up young people once they've made their mistake. They've been removed from a lesson or they've had a row or something, and you meet them in their most agitated state. And there was a training session I went to a really, really long time ago, and I can't even remember who it was with. And he talked about get out of jail phrases, and he talked about some sort of lines you can use to help unpick situations. And one I picked up, which I've used not daily, but certainly weekly ever since, is when I get called to a lesson to support a member of staff, a young person standing outside, I'm aware that I need to talk to them, and the young person's already angry at me. They're already, this is happening, it's all unfair. And all I do is I apologise to them instantly. I say, I'm really sorry I've been rude to you. I had no idea I'd been rude to you. I'm really sorry. And they look at you a bit strange and go, well, you weren't rude to me. I went, oh, I wasn't. Oh, thank you. That makes you feel so much better. So I'm presuming you're not going to be rude to me then in return. And you can see realisation dawning on them, and you can see that sort of description of reality, them going, oh, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't take it out on him. It's not his fault. It's somebody else's. And instantly the relationship changes. Instantly the conversation changes, and you go, okay, so now we've agreed to talk nicely to each other. Let me help you to unpick what's gone on and see what's going. It just diffuses situations. And it's a really simple little one-liner, but actually you can change it to how your language is. But for me, it's just that statement of reality. If you describe to the young person how they're behaving and make them understand its impact, then actually they'll make a different choice 99 times out of 100. That one thing, as I say, I've carried with me since probably my second year of teaching, and now I use it more than ever.
I think the key word you shared in there, Vic, was choice. They want the option to get out of that awful situation they've just got themselves into. So giving them that pathway out of it can really tone down a situation very quickly by giving them that choice to rectify the situation.
Yeah, and I think also inherently young people, once they've got hold of their emotions, don't want to have rows. There are not many people in the world who walk around having a disagreement one after the other. And actually giving them that opportunity to pause for breath, to reflect on what they're saying and doing, gives them a chance to back down without losing. The row isn't with me, so therefore they don't need to have a row with me. The disagreement isn't with me, and so they can comply without losing face. And I think psychologically that's quite key. You know what it's like. You back them into a corner, you're never going to win. You give them the exit, and they can. And the exit is, we're being nice to each other. Let's work together to sort it out, because actually I'm a nice person and so are you.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Vic. So let's move on to a resource that you can share with our listeners.
I remember preparing for my interview, and I know it's still around online, and there was Sir Tim Brighouse is one of my heroes. I think that what he stands for, what he's done in his career is just wonderful. A great talent, I think. But Sir Tim wrote a pamphlet, and it is literally a pamphlet. It's maybe 15, 16 pages long. It's called How Head Teachers Survive and Thrive. And he wrote it, and it talks about lots and lots of things in it. It talks about, the skills, the tasks of being a head, and it talks about the most important thing a head teacher does is create positive energy. But But in it, there's a section that's called Delegation. And I remember my headship training, and the very first thing that the tutor on my headship training said, just to let you know, to be a successful head, you're going to have to learn to delegate. And you'll have to accept the fact that nobody will do it quite how you want it done, but they may do it better. And that stuck with me. And delegation's always been one of those, I think it's always a sticky point. And in that little pamphlet that Sir Tim has produced, it talks about the 9 levels of delegation, starting from, I'm going to tell you exactly what to do, and all you have to do is do it, to, I've told you what the problem is, I expect you to go and solve it, I expect you to do it, I don't expect you to tell me because I trust you to do it, and that's it, And actually, where do we exist in schools? What level of empowerment do we give people? How distributed really is our leadership? If somebody's in charge of, let's say, initial teacher education in school, are they able to make all the decisions about mentoring and support and stuff, or have they got to check with me? And if they've got to check with me, I'm probably going to slow that process down. So that whole pamphlet is brilliant. That particular thing on delegation is a real strength.
And you've given me the link to that pamphlet. So what I'll do is I'll put that in our show notes page so that all of our listeners can go there and access it. And then they've got that to help them whenever they want.
Absolutely. If you're applying for a leadership team post in any school, I would absolutely advise you read it. Even better if you're applying for a headship.
That's awesome. Thanks, Vic. And before we go, you said at the start of the show, and I'd like our listeners to kind of get a bit more information about this, about your new book that's coming out. So can you tell them what that's all about, please?
Okay, the book's out. It's called The Best Job in the World, and it's a little bit about educating Essex. It's quite a lot of talk about leadership and what I think the important things are about leadership, and the privilege that it is, the absolute privilege that it is, but also the responsibility it brings for us. And hopefully it's quite an easy, well, I've been told it's a very easy read because it's basically me talking and writing, and hopefully people can hear my voice through it. But it is a celebration of being a head teacher. I absolutely, utterly and completely believe that I have the best job in the world. Professional footballers can keep their jobs. I have the best job in the world. I'm surrounded by radiators all day, people who give away energy and warmth, and I go to school and I laugh more than I feel miserable. So how many people can say that about their jobs? And really it's a celebration of being a teacher and being a head teacher even more so.
Exactly. And when I went to Google to type that in, the other thing that came up as being the best job in the world was a caretaker on an island in Australia.
Fantastic. That'll be my retirement job then.
Okay, well, we'll put all that in our show notes page so our listeners can go there and they can get the link to your book directly. So before we say goodbye, Vic, it's been totally awesome you joining me on the show, and you've shared so much knowledge and it's been so valuable. But if our listeners want to connect with you and find you on Twitter perhaps, or to find some more information out about the podcast with you, how can they connect with you?
There's a few different ways. Twitter's the obvious way. To @ Vic Goddard is an easy one. My school website has my email address on it and my mobile number on it, so they can always contact me through the school website quite easily. And I'm fortunate enough to be invited to talk at conferences and stuff around the country and actually some overseas over the last few years. So please just say hello, because that's the most important thing. And even more so, if there's something that Passmores can help with, then come and visit. All I ask is if somebody comes to visit, they bring 2 things. They bring a USB stick to take any resources they want with them, because I stole them from somebody else anyway. And they bring a new idea that we maybe haven't thought of.
And can I just add something on the top of that? If you're going to meet Vic, then he likes Cadbury's cream eggs.
You gave my secrets away.
Thank you for joining us today on Inspiration for Teachers. For more resources, tips and advice, visit our website, inspirationforteachers.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, we would love to connect with you. Just click like on our Facebook page at facebook.com/inspirationforteachers.